Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Welcome to the Word on the Street. I hope you had a great weekend. Today I want to talk about two stories, both of which could be a grave threat to the United States of America. However, one of them, in my opinion, is a much greater threat than the other. Putin unveils POSEIDON, a radioactive tsunami weapon system. Vladimir Putin has announced the successful test of the POSEIDON, a nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed underwater drone. So what this thing is supposed to do is it's like a huge torpedo. It looks like a big torpedo, and it's supposed to sneak up on the coast of whatever country they want to deploy it on. And it's going to create a huge tsunami that's going to be filled with radioactive water. The weapon is designed as unstoppable and designed to create radioactive tsunamis to devastate coastal cities. This announcement is part of a series of recent Russian weapons tests, including this B cruise missile signaling a major escalation in posturing. It sounds to me like we're entering into another Cold War. The development is framed by the Kremlin as a direct response to NATO's expansion and U.S. missile defense systems. The existence of such a weapon challenges traditional nuclear deterrence and raises the stakes of global conflict to an unprecedented level. The weapon is 65 feet long, 100 tons, with a 6,200-mile range, and can allegedly evade detection, dive deeper than 300 feet, and deliver two 100 megaton warheads, potentially triggering radioactive tsunamis. Now let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, why it is that I don't think we have to fear this. I don't remember where I read this, but maybe it was in a book or something. Maybe it was Sun Tzu. But you know, they say that you don't want to spoil the well. And what it means is that in the olden times, a way to destroy a village that was conquered was to taint their well, to poison their well. But why would you want to do that if you want to use the resources within that village? I don't think that these leaders, for lack of a better word, are going to do something where they're going to leave a world behind that is useless to them. They want a world that they can control. However, ladies and gentlemen, before we go on to our second story, I would like to introduce you to a new sponsor of the Alaska Prepper channel. Ladies and gentlemen, you all know that I've spent years helping people prepare for uncertain times through practical action coupled with real-world solutions, and most importantly, faith. One of the smartest steps I've taken over the years is moving part of my savings into physical gold and silver. And that's why I've decided to partner with Alpha Omega Gold. They help people like you and me protect what we've earned over the years instead of letting it burn in the inferno of inflation. Alpha Omega Gold helps you protect your wealth by safely holding it outside the system through direct physical delivery of your precious metals in your hands or with a gold and silver IRA. So why did I decide to partner with Alpha Omega Gold? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I talked to the owner at hand. I did my research and found out that they have a great Better Business Bureau rating, and they are very charitable and a faith-based organization. They help guide you with patience and understanding with your personal circumstances, so it's tailored to you. They truly represent honesty and integrity built on biblical values, trust, and personal preparedness. If you're concerned about inflation, central bank control, or the weakening dollar, give Alpha Omega Gold a call at 855-426-4653 or simply click on the link that I'm going to leave on a pinned comment and or the description of this video.
Massive, explosive news that happened overnight that the mainstream media is not talking about, and for good reason, because they don't want to cause a run on the banks.
The collapse of the banking system, in my opinion, is a lot more dangerous and probable than a nuclear war. With a nuclear blast, it's over in fractions of a second. However, for those of you that don't know, during the Great Depression, people did starve, and it's a slow and painful death. Is the Fed quietly signaling trouble ahead? Powell injects $29.4 billion into the banking system, the biggest repo operation since 2020. as U.S. bank reserves crash to $2.8 trillion. Now you have to understand that if the M2 money supply, which is all of the money that's circulating in your bank accounts, your pockets, everywhere in CDs, 401ks, etc., if all of that money in the M2 money supply in the United States of America is roughly $22 trillion, and the banks only have $2.8 trillion on hand, how in the world could they ever satisfy their customers should they request their funds? And the FDIC has merely about 1/3 to 1/2 of 1% of the monies needed to make you whole. The Federal Reserve made a huge move that very few people noticed. And when did they do it? They did it on Friday night, on Halloween. It quietly injected over $29 billion into the banking system overnight, the largest liquidity boost in more than 5 years. It's kind of like if you know that you're going to overdraft your check, what do you try to do? Man, if I don't get money in the bank right now, it's going to be overdraft and I'm going to end up paying fees, etc., etc. Except in this case, it's not in the tens or hundreds of dollars. In this case, it's in the billions of dollars. The operation happened on October 31st of this year through overnight repos, short-term loans where banks trade treasuries for cash. It's a signal that the system is under real pressure. U.S. bank reserves have crashed to $2.8 trillion, a 4-year low, the sharpest drop since 2020, and that is serious. When reserves fall, liquidity dries up and funding tightens, meaning what? That banks are not going to lend money out, stagnating the economy. We're already in a recession, ladies and gentlemen. I would even call it a small depression, but it's just going to get worse, and that's why you have to protect what you have. That's why you have to stay prepared in all things. And yes, this, in my opinion, is a bigger threat than any nuclear bomb that any country may have and is posing to use it against their adversary. These things never end well for the common folk, for you and me, for the person that goes out there and works for a wage and a salary. You end up losing everything slowly but surely. And people will suffer unless they are protected. You know, I went ahead and did a little exercise and asked AI, hey, what happens if the banking system fails? What would be the precautions or the steps that the Federal Reserve or the government would take? Historically, governments have consistently intervened following stock market crashes and financial crises to stabilize the economy. We have to ask ourselves, how have the banks and governments intervened to restore confidence and provide relief? And is it really relief? It may be relief, but in the very short term. We've found that out the hard way since 2008. The notion that help is not coming is not supported by the historical record of major crises in the U.S. and other developed nations. Ladies and gentlemen, help is not coming. Did help come after 2008? It was a facade of what help should be, but it wasn't help. It was the government making you poorer so that they can stay in control. It's all about the money. If they control the money, they control you, ladies and gentlemen. If they control the money, they control the food. What's going on right now with SNAP? What is the problem behind people not getting SNAP? Yes, the government is shut down, etc., but it's really because of the money, because the money is not there. Monetary policy actions. Now, these are some of the things that the government can do in order to ease any kind of a crash, be it a downward crash or an upward crash, because we can crash upward. Just take a look at the stock market chart of Venezuela during its hyperinflationary period, and you'll see that their stocks skyrocketed as their people got poorer and starved. So one of the things that they can do is monetary policy actions. The Federal Reserve often cuts interest rates to near zero, provides massive liquidity to the banking system, and buys debt securities to ensure credit keeps flowing to businesses and households. What does that all mean? Let's break it down. They often cut interest rates. What does that do for you, them cutting interest rates? What it does for the common person is that it increases inflation. It increases the money supply, making your dollars worth less, making your lives cost you more to live. Provide massive liquidity to the banking system. What is that? That's quantitative easing, another way of adding money to the supply, which does what? Increases the prices of everything that you have to pay in order to live. Direct financial aid or bailouts. The government has provided direct financial support to key industries and institutions deemed too big to fail, such as banks, auto companies, and insurance firms like AIG, to prevent systemic collapse. What does this mean? Provide direct financial support. It means that the government is going to transfer the wealth from you to these big corporations, just like they did in the past. The only difference between today and 20 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, is that today this crisis is going to be much bigger because there's a lot more money involved. There's a lot more derivatives, which are pretty much just bets that are hanging out there getting ready to cash in. But where is the cash going to come from if the Federal Reserve and the banks don't create it out of thin air, therefore decreasing the purchasing power of the dollars that you have today? Fiscal stimulus packages. Remember when I was screaming 5 years ago, we don't need this fiscal stimulus, because if we get it, we're going to pay the price for the rest of our lives in the amount of interest that we're going to have to pay on it. Now, the difference between today and just 5 or 6 years ago is that it costs the average American family between $1,000 to about $1,200 more per month just to retain the standard of living that they had a mere 5 or 6 years ago. Why do you think everything costs twice as much? Regulatory reforms, of course, this is what governments are good for, ladies and gentlemen, to bring up laws and regulations. Crises have often led to significant long-term reforms designed to prevent future downturns, but they never work because it keeps happening and it's going to continue to happen. Why? Because of physics, because of mathematics, because of Fibonacci. Examples include the creation of the Securities and Exchange Commission after the 1929 crash and the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act after 2008 crisis. Has that worked out well for the common people? You see, it's worked out well for the rich. It's worked out well for the billionaires that have their wealth in assets. And let's just go over a few examples because this is important for people to understand. These are some examples from history of what they did in order to fix the situation. So the Great Depression, President Roosevelt involved extensive federal intervention, public works project, and the creation of the social safety nets and regulatory bodies. How has that worked out? They leave out here that President Roosevelt, which is deemed to be one of the best presidents that ever existed. I don't know why, because what he did was effectively take away the people's money, the gold that they had, and silver as well, believe it or not, and use that to inflate the money supply and then allow the government to have all of this extra cash that he could then put the people that he impoverished to work with. So people back then were overjoyed to be able to go out there and get a job and get paid with the same money that was taken from them via confiscation and inflation. 2008 financial crisis. The government implemented the Troubled Asset Relief Program, a $700 billion plan to rescue financial institutions and automakers, along with other measures to stabilize the housing market and provide economic stimulus. How did they do this? They created money out of thin air. That's why houses cost twice as much today as they did back then. The 19 pandemic, 2020 crash, the U.S. government and Federal Reserve enacted an unprecedented $4.65 trillion in assistance, including direct payments to citizens, businesses, and the Fed directly lending to corporations and municipalities to prevent a market collapse. This is all a transfer of wealth from the working person to corporations and government pundits. Ladies and gentlemen, just to give you a quick update on the channel, I love doing the word on the street videos because I like going through the news. I like informing people of things that maybe they didn't look at the same way that I look at it. And it's a way to bounce ideas off of each other. So my goal is to be able to put out at least one video per day for the word on the street. And then at least once during the weekend, put out an actual prepping video. And I actually have a few what I think are really good prepping videos in line to go over. And if you didn't watch my prepping video from this last weekend, go take a look at it. Because if you think that that can of food that you have, which is a few days past its best buy date, is no good to eat, go take a look at that video. All right. I put myself on the line for you all, ladies and gentlemen. I jeopardized my health by eating canned food that had been sitting in that can for, I would say, over 10 years. But anyways, go check out that video and get prepared. I hope that that video that I put out this weekend shows people that they don't have to be a prepper to be prepared. You see, a prepper like myself, I love talking about this stuff. I like living this type of a lifestyle, knowing that if the power goes out, hey, I'm going to be good, right? But if you just want to be prepared, go ahead and take a look at that video and it shows you how easy it is. It's not difficult. No one has an excuse not to have a month's worth of food in their house. No one does. It's up to you. And the government is not going to come to help. It may look like help, but what they will be doing is the same thing that they've done in the past. It's the only thing that they can do, is to strip you of your wealth by transferring it from you to someone else. Having said that, let's go ahead and leave it at that. I want to say thank you again very much to the sponsor of this video. God bless every one of you. I love you all. God bless America. I'm Alaska Prepper. I'm out. And here is a bonus clip for you, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, this is what I do. You have to do what you're comfortable with. Go to the bank if you can and get some money out. Get some singles, get some fives, get some tens, maybe get some 20s. But get out what you're comfortable with holding at your home. Why? Because if the banking system does go down, cash will be king at first. Okay? Have some food. Have at least 1 month's worth of food. Get canned foods because they last a very long time as long as you store them in a temperature that does not exceed 70 degrees Fahrenheit and that does not go, I would say, below 40 degrees because you don't want your cans to get frozen. All right. And you don't want that temperature between that 40 and that 70 to fluctuate very quickly. If it fluctuates slowly up or down, that's the best. Get water. Get a water purification system. Take a look at SIMPURE. They're still having a really good sale. It goes through the 5th of this month, and it's going to allow me to give away several RO units to people that go watch this video up there. So go take a look at this video and enter to win. All right. Have medicines. If you have medicines that you count on, prescription medications, make sure that you stock up on those. Get at least a 2 or 3 month supply if you can. All right. Have yourselves a way to stay warm or stay cool, depending on where you are. But ideally, you want to concentrate on having those things that are going to preserve your life. Get some food, have a water filtration system, and if you can, get some cash out of the bank and just keep it just in case. Let's hope that you never need to use these things because of a crisis and that you're just rotating through them. But if you do need to use them, you will have them. That is what being prepared is all about.